And welcome to Everything is Attitude with our first three-time guest, I think, Jeff, right? Welcome, Jeff. Welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Today we are going to talk about lessons from ancient cultures and lessons about the attitudes that they had. And Rosemary, I'll let you expand on it a little bit if you'd like. The lessons on how cultures and ancient cultures of the past had a really wonderful attitude and connected and awareness about them that was integrated in their lives. And we're going to talk to Jeff about his experience with Native Americans, and Rosemary, you have your own experiences being so close to Great Eagle. But welcome, Rosemary and Jeff.
Awesome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to you, Al, my wonderful co-host. And yes, we have Jeff back on. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's really an honor.
It's my pleasure. We love having you. You're a great guest. Yes. Well, I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this sort of over time, and with my students, I've been thinking about how we talk about living. I talk to my students about living your faith, and talking about the difference, what it actually means to have faith. Because honestly, you can go into a hall full of people, or thousands of people even, and you say to that audience, how many of you have faith, and you can guarantee that pretty much 90% of the people in that room will put up their hand. They do have faith, whether it's faith in them, just in themselves, or whether it's faith in God, or whatever it is. But living your faith is a very different thing than having faith. Living your faith is living your life on a daily basis, every day, living that understanding, living the understanding that, you're not alone, for instance, living the understanding that, God shines his light on you, living and acting. And if every moment counts in a spiritual sense. So I thought, I was thinking back to the ancient cultures, as there are many of them. You've got too many to name, but having spent quite some time in China, I got to know quite a lot about their faith and about the ancients, and the wise men, and the wisdom of the old men, and also the wisdom of the old women. Let's not think it's just wise men and women of ancient cultures. And of course, Jeff and I were having a conversation the other day, because Jeff, you recently came back from a 3-day visit to, I'm handing over to you. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Actually, yeah, I just came back from South Dakota. I was actually out there for a week and supported by drumming and singing for 4 days at their annual Sundance. And that's their high holy time. It's the beginning of the new year for them in this particular area. So they welcome me. I've been going out there for nearly 20 years. I've been a participant in the dance, and now I'm there as a supporter, and I'm kind of an elder. I'm Uncle Jeff to a lot of the young guys that are out there.
So, right. Okay. Would you really call yourself an elder? I'm fine.
Well, I don't, but they do. I mean, not as an elder within the tribe, but as someone who has experience.
Right. Not as the grandfathers, not
Absolutely.
as
Yeah, no.
that we would call the grandfathers, but
Right.
okay, I know.
But when a young person brings you a plate of food and you're sitting in the chair, you realize you've arrived to a certain level.
Does that make you nervous, or
Yeah, a little bit, yes.
It's a little bit like, I stand in front of people, and of course, everyone knows that I'm a teacher. But, there's always this thought that sort of runs through your head, no matter how good a teacher you are. I think it makes you a better teacher to be sharp, and to not just presume that you know everything, and to not just be blasé about your teaching.
Right.
And especially the kind of stuff that I teach, it's tough stuff sometimes. And I have to always, think, you know, it's hard because I am naturally a teacher, but it's hard because I have to always be mindful of the standard I have to keep. And the fact that when I'm, you know, with my students, they sort of look at me, they gaze up at me as if I'm, you know, somewhere up on that pedestal. And you know what happens when you're on a pedestal, don't you? If you're up on a pedestal, it's really easy to fall off.
Yes,
Nobody really wants to be on a pedestal, which is what you're saying, really, right? Nobody
exactly.
really wants to be on the pedestal because it's very easy to fall off. And Al, you're a teacher, so you must have, in some ways, the same feeling of wanting to do the best for your students, but at the same time wanting them to view you as merely a teacher. That, you know, we make mistakes as well. We can
Yep.
make as well.
Show vulnerability. Always show and understand that you are vulnerable and can learn just as much from them as you're showing.
Yeah,
Showing. Yeah.
yeah. That's what I always tell my students. I'm learning every day. So Jeff, excuse me. So the topic here is, you know, sort of the I'm sorry, the ancient versus the more modern day. Now we've talked about this on this show before about how you know how all of this technology interferes and so on and so forth. It all interferes with the way we used to be. We have become much less spiritual now. I think people feel that it's enough, and some people don't even go to church, but a lot of people feel that they go to church on a Sunday, they say their prayers, they, you know, sing their hymns, which is fabulous, nothing wrong with that at all. But then they come home. Do they live that? Do they live their faith throughout the week? And I think it's so hard in this day and age, and so hard, especially in the Western culture, for us to live our faith every day. But when you go to the Sundance and they're all there and they're gathering, and of course, there's this very sort of beautiful feeling and the camaraderie between everyone, and the elders teaching the new kids and so on. When they pack up and they go home, it's a little bit
Mm.
like us packing up going home from church. Do they then continue to live that faith, or do you think that, as I do, I think the ancients, the grandfathers, and we're not just talking about the Native American community, we're talking
Right.
about the ancients in every culture. Um, but do you think there's a tendency then to say, okay, that's that then, and now we're going back to our real lives, as
Right.
opposed to the ancients understanding that that is their real life. It's an everyday. It's not just a 5 days or a week long celebration. It's an everyday thing. What do you think? I'm interested to know what you think.
Well, there's two thoughts that came to mind. One in particular is having been there in the Sundance and experienced that. I'm out in South Dakota or southern Alberta, Canada, or in Montana with these experiences, and then I come back to Maine where I live, and we all talk to one another as brothers and sisters in that ceremony. Where else could you be for 4 days and be absolutely supported to pray and to be in that frame of mind? And what a beautiful gift that is. The hard part is the other 361 days that we're home. And when we make a commitment in any spiritual community setting, I think of your teachers, I mean, your healing people that you're helping, the people that you're helping with meditations. When I step forward and say, teach me, I then have a responsibility to practice that, which I'm being taught by you or by one of the people that I know from the West. I have a responsibility to honor and respect the knowledge that's coming through you that didn't begin with you. And that language is part of the Sundance, and it is real. And all through the year, I know I'm on Facebook a lot, so there's technology in there, but it's a way to stay communicating with people that are
Yeah,
all over the
yeah,
country and Mexico and Canada, and we communicate a lot. And we're reminding each other with smiles. Pay attention, you made that pledge. We're watching, and it's not a judging, blaming, shaming watching. It's a wonderful, supportive acknowledgement of the pledge that each individual makes for themselves. And I think one of the things that I know from my church going days, and I do not denigrate or criticize any of that. I really believe strongly that that sense of community is very important. However, my need in that setting was for me. It was to be quiet for me. I could take an hour on Sunday morning and be in that space of religious, spiritual doctrine, if you will. Now, with my life the way it's been over probably the last 15 years, though I've been involved in ceremonies for over 20 years, but more actively over the last 16 years, really, um, it's a daily thing. There isn't a day goes by that I don't have words of gratitude in my mind or that I vocalize to friends and people I see. Use the word love more. And I'm doing that every day. So I don't find myself needing an hour on Sunday or an hour on Monday night, though those are wonderful times if that's necessary. But it is a practice. You have to do it. And the Sundance, yeah, sure, human, everybody's human. So yeah, there's people that go into the grocery line and they're rude to the cashier or they steal a parking place or, those are things that happen. That's human nature. But the awareness of what we've pledged to do and who we are with that is really important because I might be the only person that someone sees that they know has been part of that. So I have a responsibility and I'm not perfect.
Let me ask you this. You say that, you pledge. Who do you pledge to? I know who I pledge to. Who do you pledge to? Who do you
I,
make that pledge to?
I use the word creator.
So God, the
God.
creator,
God.
that God force, that universal energy, whatever it is you want to call it, that's what you.
And what I also do, I make that pledge as a solemn commitment for whatever comes to me. I usually will find a kindred spirit, meaning another person, might be my wife, it might be one of my Sundance brothers or sisters, and I'll share that to make it real for me, to make it more physical. It's my humanness, and they'll do the same. I've been gifted that. People have told me, say, hey, keep an eye on me this year, check in with me, see you next summer. And that's a long time, man. 11 months, 12 months, it's a long time. But that's trusting, learning to trust and being willing to have someone help you. I don't have to do this on my own, ever, never. I've got you, I've got Al, I've got people that know me all through my life, and I'm eternally grateful for that.
It's hard though, I think, for people who don't have this or haven't been through this or experienced this kind of the revelations that you have. I know, Al, the revelations that you've had in the past, and many of those revelations have been through me as your teacher. It's hard, isn't it? How do you keep it up? Before you answer that, I have to tell you that I said to you, I know who I make the pledge to, and I make the pledge to myself. I make that pledge to my soul because I am, Teilhard de I never can say it. Teilhard de Chardin wrote, "We are spiritual beings having a human experience."
Right.
And I always like to add to that my own little thing at the end. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, hopefully in a spiritual way, because we're having a human experience and that doesn't necessarily mean in a spiritual way. Mm-hmm. And we also know the word spiritual means different things to different people. But for me, I try to have this human experience in this spiritual way. So if I'm making the pledge to my soul, if I'm making that pledge to myself, I am not separate from that God force. So as I'm making that pledge to myself, I'm making that pledge completely. So anyone, everything, anything that is around there is part of who I am. So I'm making my pledge in that way.
I believe that's true, Rosemary. What you're saying about the love and the light that's within me is outside of me as well.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I don't feel worthy of the grandness of what I perceive to be out there. So there's times in Lakota, the words, and this is oversimplified, but the words are Wakan Tanka. And what it means, paraphrasing, is great mysterious. Because we don't, as humans, pretend to know the name of that grand
Whatever
light,
that is.
that love, that immense love, the love of a child born in that moment, or the moment when someone, as you know, someone crosses over. The love that is in those moments, it's incredible. And I'm bumbling along in my life, not really paying attention to that intensity. And then I
No,
get, go ahead.
yeah. So I want to, I guess, play a little bit of sort of the devil's advocate, right? So
Oh yeah, great, brilliant. We
where
like that.
we're in a society now, 24/7 connection, always connected, always on the go, industry, you name it, popping up around us. How can we learn now from what those ancestors done and some of the practices that you've engaged in, Jeff? How could we apply that to us now? How could that be possible when it's a completely different time? It's a completely different social structure. How can we apply that now? So how could the everyday person apply that philosophy, mindset, practice now,
I
given
just
that they don't know anything about it or know anything about those experiences?
simply put, if I can, I don't keep things simple. Um, it happened with me 2 days ago. I was on my tractor. I backed into a ledge. I broke a part on my tractor. I knew how to fix it, and I knew that the part could be fixed. I didn't need a new part. I went to a shop. The person at the shop looked really angry, didn't look happy in his job. I didn't want to do business with him, but I needed the part fixed. I put the part on the counter. He looked at it, quizzed me up. I turned away, physically turned away from him for a moment, just a brief moment. And when I turned back, I said, "Well, what can we do about this? What's the solution here?" Instead of my old behavior, and it's still in me, is to push him to do what I want him to do. And instead, I was able to back off, holster my 6-shooters, so to speak, because I'm right and I'm going to show you how right I am. I was able to say, what can we do about this? And in the same moment, the service manager came out and said, "Oh, we got one of those out back. Let me take that. I'll give it to you tomorrow morning. I'll just take a torch, heat it up, straighten it, and give it back to you." It's exactly what I wanted, but I was able to go into that situation without being impatient. You know, we pray. I hear people praying for patience. I don't do.
I, I'm on a I'm on a show, darling. I'll call you back in a little bit. Sorry, that's my
Yeah.
grandson insisting on calling me.
So I think
Uh,
the practice of interpersonal relationships for me is probably the most graphic example of my willingness to be one among people instead of separate from. Because, like you said, we can live a life a long time without ever having real personal contact with people.
So you said the practice of interpersonal relationships.
Meaning being patient, and I'm a fire sign. I'm a fire retrospective. It doesn't come natural to me to be easygoing. I want to blow
not a
up.
bit, not one bit.
But it's a small example, Al, of letting someone go in front of you in a grocery line. Practicing me for me, and that's a spiritual practice because you'll get an acknowledgement, you'll get a smile.
Well, not always, but it
Well,
doesn't matter though. You're not.
exactly right. Exactly.
I
It's not
feel
about a payback. Right.
it's not. I tried to teach my daughter this when she was younger. I tried to teach my grandson this. I tried to teach my students this. Smile without expectation.
Right.
Be kind without expectation. The expectation is the killer. If you're expecting people to behave in a certain way, you will inevitably be disappointed every time. So instead of expectation, you can be hopeful. And I teach my students being hopeful is fantastic. If you're nice to someone, you're hopeful that they can, we're human after all. We're hopeful that they might say thank you. But if they don't, don't get grumpy and don't allow that to stop you from doing it the next time. You're smiling, or you're doing a nice thing, or you're doing a good deed, or whatever it is. And you should not have expectation, because you will be disappointed from time to time. But just remain hopeful that people, even if I came out of the bank a few weeks ago, and there were two ladies sitting in a car, and one of the ladies was sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, and the car windows were open, and I didn't think anything. My car was right next to theirs, parked right next to theirs. I didn't think a thing about it, and I just put my head in the window, and I just very gently said to this lady, "Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help you?" And I reached in and I took hold of her hands. And both ladies looked at me as if I was a crazy person, because that's not something that people usually do. But then this woman started, she just opened up to me. And I talked to her and I explained that however she's feeling, there are people around who do care, and there are people around who do notice her, and that she's not this lost and lonely person that she thinks she is. And it made a fantastic difference to them. Um, did they thank me? No, because they were still startled when I walked away from them. They were still wondering what was that to them. But it made me feel that's a good thing, because whether or not somebody appreciates your actions there and then, if your action is born of kindness and it's born of love and it's born of caring, then at some point you hope that that will resonate with them. At some point that you think, I hope they'll remember that. Or maybe I hope they got a little bit of my energy and they feel a little bit better now. So you're hopeful that people are going to, get something from it, but it's not about, wanting accolades. It's not about wanting the smile in return. And I see this so many times, people open the door for somebody and people walk through. I mean, I've been on the receiving end myself. I don't know whether people think I'm the doorman at that time or whatever it is, and people just walk through casually, and there's no recognition. And at some point I'll say, okay, I'm done now. So
Yeah.
let the door go. you know but if you're going to complain, well, they were rude, they didn't even say thank you, then don't open the door,
Right.
because you're setting yourself up for such a disappointment. Living your faith means doing things, I think, means doing things in the right way, trusting that if something awful is happening, then there has to be a reason for it. Don't fight. Don't fight with yourself. Don't allow other people to make you feel grumpy or make you feel disappointed or sad or what have you. Just get on with your own life and do it in the best way you can. And no pointing the finger at other people, which is a really hard thing not to do sometimes, right?
Thinking about what you said earlier, Al, about the practice for people that aren't aware. I think people are conscious when nice things happen or good things happen, or when hard things happen and their hearts reach out. I think some people just don't show it. But I like the karma idea. For me, what goes around comes around, and I can't. This is a comment that I've heard, a quote that I've heard from recovery work that I've done for myself. I can't think my way into right acting. I have to act my way into right thinking. So holding the door without an expectation. Another phrase that I've heard around expectations is expectation is a planned resentment.
It is really.
And it's a power.
You're setting yourself up if you're expecting,
Right.
or if you
So,
say, "Well, I expected that she would be nicer to me than that," or whatever. If you get the way to tell whether you're expecting or whether you're hoping is that if you're expecting and your expectations aren't met, then you're disgruntled.
mhm.
If you're hopeful and but again, people react maybe not in such a nice way. You're hopeful, you'd simply accept that people are who they are and you just have to let it go by. But expectation causes so much resentment because you're already about to judge that person and their behavior on your expectations, which may be completely unrealistic.
I had an experience years ago where I was in the midst of a Sundance and I was thirsty. We were fasting and we weren't drinking liquids at the time. And an elder, an old timer from up in Canada, a native man, came and gave me a pea-sized pebble. And he said, put this on your tongue when you go back out. It'll help you to keep your mouth moist. And I thought it was kind of odd because I was really dry and I didn't want to put a rock in my mouth, but I did it. And my mouth was more moist. And he told me the story of in the old days when the people were more nomadic, they might walk for days without water. And they knew the tricks to keep themselves happy and sustained.
Yeah.
And he could see me white knuckling, gritting my teeth. I'm going to get through this. And I came back in and he said, how'd that work for you? And I thanked him. It was such a small thing, but that was a practice. That was something that he gave to me. I have that I really think of that as a sacred rock now. I mean, I have that in a little bag and I covet the idea of it, not the stone itself, but the idea of it. I really relish that gift.
But
So,
not only did that little bit of ancient wisdom
right,
help you with your thirst, it also, as it's working with you, is helping your state of mind. It's
right,
helping you to be in the present.
right,
It's helping you to focus on what is important as opposed to just going crazy for that drink of water. So he not only gave you the gift of moisture in your mouth, he gave you such a much more important and a bigger gift.
right,
And I think if we're going to think about what can we do to have an attitude that is more like the ancient cultures and bringing this all into our everyday lives, I think that one of the ingredients that we really should focus on, I think, is that whatever gift we're given, if you just look a little deeper, a little further, you'll see that what you thought was the gift is only a part of the gift because
right.
there's always more to it. Does that
Oh,
make sense?
for sure. And it's like, it's such a multi-layered gift because first of all, this older gentleman sees a white guy from the east coast of the US up in their native country doing the ceremony and he embraced me. When my son passed away 16 years ago, one of the elders up there, who I had not personally met yet, but you met him, his name is Mickey. He came to Vermont and he hugged me and
Such a nice guy.
he hugged me and he said in my ear very quietly, so not to embarrass me, he said, when you lose one, you gain many. And that never has left me. And I have been able to use that so many times to people close to me who have gone through similar situations that my wife and I went through, and other people who have had loss in their lives, a loss of a family member or a friend.
I think that's true of communities. Certainly, when I was growing up, I'm not so ancient that I can call myself one of the grandfathers, but still,
Well, you'd be a grandmother.
perhaps I'm an elder. Perhaps I'm an elder. But I think that when I was growing up, families, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, people used to live in a community.
Right.
And so if you needed a babysitter, you didn't have to go out and pay for one. There was always someone in the family to do that for you. And uh, as I was growing up, of course, it was dying out then, but still it was there, and it was that. And if you've experienced that, if you've had that experience, you know when you know when this guy said to you, you know, you lose one and you gain many. I don't know that that's so true today. Al, what do you think? I actually can't hear you. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
There,
Sorry. I
there you
think
go.
there's probably less of that today. I think it's regionalized too, depending on where you're from. I've been on the East Coast, and it's diminished greatly on the East Coast, where I grew up on Long Island in New York. But coming out to a place like Colorado in a brand new community, I see more of it. But I don't think, I think the missing piece is these ancient cultures knew they were all part of a system in a way, right? This an ecosystem, a spiritual system, that everything was connected, not just to nature, but to each other.
Right.
And that even when you have hints of it today in certain areas of the world of the United States or the world in general, it's still not what it was then. And the us forgetting how connected people were, and that was an active part of their culture, their religion, their society.
It was just simply the way they lived, right?
Yeah, that was part of their fiber, right? And that's something that it should be in our recipe to get back to. Not just, I mean, Jeff, you were talking before about just which intrigued me, like many of the things you say, um, being able to put your feet down on
Undisturbed ground.
undisturbed ground. Yeah, which was, if you could explain what you're saying with that, because that's a really great analogy or metaphor about what we are about today, and sort of that disconnect that we have today. Can you just explain, what you said off air in that regard?
Yes. I was taught when I did my first Vision Quest, one of the preparations was thinking about the idea that I was going to be sitting on a hill for up to 4 days without any interaction with other people, physical. I certainly was going to have interactions with spirit, with spiritual. Well, I didn't know if I would, but I assumed I would. I knew that was happening. Whether I could see it or not was the other part of it. But what my friend Jim had taught me was to stand outside on the grass or in the snow or on the beach barefoot, no matter what time of year. Now, I'm always getting trouble when I visit Rosemary because she has those fire ants on her lawn, and when I go out with my bear to put my shoes on, so I do.
They're actually not there anymore. Yeah,
so that, I'm a little careful when I'm down there, but I tell people who ask me for these kinds of tools to take your shoes off and stand on your lawn and close your eyes and imagine every blade of grass that is touching your foot, and think about every one of those contact points that you can feel. Go around your right foot first and go right around the circle of your foot. Go around your left foot. And I do it in a clockwise direction, so it's the same every time. And I do it often. I've taken pictures of my feet in the snow, and I'll make a joke about it. People think you're crazy. Well, I'm not going to stand out there till I get frostbite, but it's not difficult to do that. It's not. It's just not something I want to do for an hour or 2 hours. And I do it on the beach. I remember when our native friends came from Canada, their daughters had never stood in the ocean, and I had them take their shoes off and roll up their pants, and they were giggling like little children. They were older teenage girls, and they were just giggling. They couldn't get over the sensation, and that primal simple thing is something that a lot of people don't pay attention to. Now everybody likes to have I know Rosemary does, likes her painted toes in the beach sand.
I'm actually sitting here barefoot as we speak, just to let you guys know.
But you know what a simple, wonderful practice to feel that energy of the earth at which we are part of, and you can feel it coming through your feet.
But it's very different. Just let's be clear. It's very different than tripping about. I don't wear shoes very often, and I'll trip outside to get the mail, and I'll trip outside to do this, that, and the other. I'll trip outside to go to the pool. I'm barefoot. But what you're talking about is actually being aware of walking on the ground, on the earth, connecting with the earth. So it's not just a question of going barefoot, it's a question of being aware, which is again another way which they used to do. Living your faith means actually always being connected to the ground, to the earth that we're a part of. So you're talking about being aware of stuff.
Right. The other piece.
Very often when I head to the mail in my bare feet, I'm tripping on my toes because the pavement's so hot. So that's not what we're talking about, is it?
Well, as long as you know
with my painted toes.
as long as you know there's a couple of layers under the tar,
Right.
and you do get to the ground.
Yeah.
The other practice that I have given to people, and that was one that was given to me, was to stand still and listen for 7 sounds at the same time. Once you get through that ticklish foot thing, then you're kind of saying, well, what am I doing out here? And I help people by saying, now listen for 7 sounds. It could be your heartbeat in your ears. It could be your breath. It could be a jet flying over. It could be a truck on the interstate. It might be birds. It might be things that are going on. You're going to hear 7 sounds. And it's a beginning of some of your practices, Rosemary, that you're teaching, is getting your body quiet enough so that you can meditate.
Well, we're doing with my students. People find this a hard concept to understand. I like to get my students to the point where they can hear the sound of silence.
Right.
And I give them this, we lead up to it. There are other things, meditation is part of that. But can you hear the grass growing?
Mm.
Can you hear the moon swinging in the sky? Now, if you're going to do it literally and you think you're going to hear it with your ears, of course, you're not, it's not going to happen. But if you're doing it on a spiritual level, if you're raising your level of consciousness and you're listening for the sound of silence and you're listening for these other sounds, which is what you're trying to teach people, when you are able to finally hear the sound of silence, that is when you are silent within you. And that is when you start to flower. You have an opportunity to flower. You have an opportunity to raise your level of consciousness. You have an opportunity to grow. However, if you come at these exercises, the one you just described and what I'm talking about, if you come to these exercises with an attitude of I can't, or what you're really saying is it's not I can't, it's that I don't want to, or I'd rather not.
Silly, this is silly,
Yeah, I mean, I took a class yesterday with our online course, and I was helping people to understand what you need to do to ground yourself, that you need to step back, not step away, simply to step back, take a breath, and be who you are. And immediately, one or two say, "Oh, I can't, I can't do that." And then there are others who say, "Well, I already do that." But they're not listening to me because what they're actually doing is not what I'm asking them to do. And when somebody says to you, I can't, what they're saying is, I won't. I'm a tough teacher, so that's what I think. But a lot of people are afraid when they say I can't, or I don't want to do that. It's because they're afraid. I think they're afraid of being vulnerable. They're afraid
Right.
of feeling vulnerable. Why don't you tell the story of the breath? Of the singing.
Oh, I was visiting with Rosemary down in Florida, and I like to sing. My parents were both musicians, And somewhere along the line, I got the message that I wasn't good enough or I couldn't do it right. So I never did it. Then I sang in a church choir, and the choir director was looking at me, shaking her head, saying, "Where were you 10 years ago?" Because I can carry a tune. I can follow music. I have a good ear, but I don't consider myself a musician. I don't know music. I like the sound. Rosemary helped me to sing, and I sing most.
Because I'm a singer.
Well, she's a singer for sure, and you've also been trained. You know how to sing with your diaphragm and your whole body.
Right there.
I
Yeah.
I sing with my throat. Now
Well, hopefully you used to do.
I just sat
And
4 days on the drum, and I can tell you, I was singing from my solar plexus. That's where I was singing from.
but
When
you
I had the practice with Rosemary, she talked me down from my throat to my chest, to my diaphragm, to my solar plexus to sing from my belly, from my core. And the emotion that came out of me made me really uncomfortable because I was going to burst into tears. So I stopped. And there's no coincidence. That's where I carried and still carry some of my emotional wounds or fears or whatever it is. That's kind of where it carries in me, is right in the middle. So that moment of breaking through that was really powerful, and I felt it.
did I kick you then?
No, but you told me to keep doing it. So
Sing from your solar plexus. Uh, because yeah, and I think again it's about attitude. I have this little girl. She's really lovely, and like you, she's sort of singing from here. She's got a beautiful voice. She can carry a tune, but she is not a singer because, you know, and she sort of leans over so her lungs collapse. So I said to her, "Where is the breath? You've
right,
got to, but you've got to be brave in order to do that. And you've also, I think, you've got to be brave enough not only to have a teacher, but to listen to the teacher. What's the point in having a teacher if you're not, if you know, so I know you said to do that, but I decided to do it my way. But what's the point then, right? I mean, Al, you're a teacher. Do you like your students to do it your way, or do you prefer them to do it, you
I
know?
prefer that they value my experience as a teacher, but am open to suggestion, I guess, at times. But when you have somebody that knows or has a lot more experience, that suggestion better be a pretty good one. um, so
It's about having a great attitude.
it is.
Do we have any comments?
We have a couple of comments.
Okay.
Um, I want to come back to that point though first about that fear and the vulnerability piece and how it was then versus how it is now. And I think I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this. Why is it that is it the 24/7 connection? Is it the fear of being judged? Like, what is it that back in ancient times people were okay being vulnerable, being opening themselves to sensitivity and awareness around them, versus today people are more insular. They're more really they live life in solidarity in a lot of ways, right? And a lot of it does stem from fear of connectedness, fear of awareness, fear of opening themselves up to their surroundings, the earth, society. So why is that now, and what can we tell folks to get past that?
Jeff, what do you go
the
first?
the thoughts that I'm having when you first brought this up, Al, is I don't live a minimalist life. I have a very comfortable life, and I'm very grateful for it. I work hard. My wife works hard, so we have a good life. But materialism compared to spiritualism, and I'm thinking about people that are not wanting to be vulnerable because there aren't many places where you are supported in your fear from an early age. Little children preschool like your grandson and my about to be granddaughter, and they're going to be allowed to feel. They're going to be allowed to cry. They're going to be allowed to love, to get peanut butter on their shirt, and they're not going to be shamed. But at some point, there's a shift in our culture. There was in my upbringing, and then I think with some of the other people. But materialistic life isn't spiritually sustainable. I don't think they have to be exclusive of one another, but I think that our culture is too materialistic, and that striving. I mean, I see it in places where there's abject poverty, where people have no extra money, yet they've got a cell phone and their face is glued into it because it's a way of being connected to something bigger, but it's all material. Though there is a reward. If you post something on Facebook and you get 150 or 200 likes, you get kind of, wow, that's pretty cool. So people are doing that. I don't think it started with Facebook. I mean, it certainly didn't. But I think about spirituality in the old culture. People in the community had roles. Didn't mean they didn't have multiple roles, but you had an elder that could talk to you about the things that you were concerned about, and you knew you could go there. We don't have that as much. It's available, but
Again, it's the community that you're talking about, isn't it?
right, right,
I mean, my family are from Scotland and from Wales, so we're looking at a clan-based community. Native Americans looking at a tribal community, and so on and so forth. But we don't have that anymore.
right. My parents, my dad specifically, I know his story more than my mom's, but his family came from Russia and Central Europe in that area in 1915, 16, 17, that area. They settled in Maine where there was a lot of construction and people of the same ethnic background,
Right.
which happens. There were a lot of
Yeah.
Italians,
Yeah.
a lot of Italians in the area, Spanish, Hispanic, Mexican, whoever, and that's still there. But they settled, and like you said earlier, Rosemary, there were 9 children in my dad's family. He was the youngest, but they had a community of people, and they were sharing bread, literally and figuratively, because it was easy, it was comfortable. They didn't have to learn another language to do it. And now that's all watered down. Everything is so available. I mean, bread is so available. It's a different world. It's materialistic.
I'd like to just address the materialistic thing because although in some part I agree with you, Grey Eagle will say, and I wish I could pull the quote off of the top of my head, but I can't. But he talks about tears, and he said, because a lot of people think that if you're a spiritual person, then you should abandon all the luxuries, that you should give them away. There are lots of churches who encourage their communities, their followers to give their stuff away. They encourage them to give it to the church or to give it to the needy or what have you. And I feel if we're not careful, we're going to, sort of just make that huge leap that we can't be spiritual, or we can't be good, or we can't be godly, whatever it is we want to be. We can't be that if we've got a big house and a nice, nice stuff and nice jewelry,
Right.
and so on and so forth. And I don't think that's the case.
I don't either. I don't. Yeah.
I think that, as Grey Eagle would put it, and of course I wish I could remember the quote, and I'm going to find it out, and I should probably put it on Facebook in a couple of days, but it's basically, he's talking about tears, and he's talking about whether or not you have a silk a cushion, or whether you have linen, or whether you have simple, rough burlap, whatever it is that you have there. Tears are tears, and whether you cry them on a rough, harsh material, or whether you cry them on a silk pillow, really doesn't make any difference whatsoever, because tears are tears. Having said that, laying your head on a silk pillow can ease you or give you that little bit of comfort for the feel of it and for the sensation of it. You don't have to abandon all things material. You just have to make sure that none of that material stuff that you do have is more important or more powerful than
Right.
who you are inside and what you are inside and who you want to be inside. If you're so focused on making money, 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 money that you forget to be nice to people, or you forget to give time to your family, or you sort of so focused on the material that everything else goes by the wayside. And people, there are a lot of people who are like that. Then that's when, anything in excess, I believe, is harmful. But I don't want people to get the impression that I'm sitting here playing with my gold watch. but if for 1 second, I don't want people to think that they can't have beautiful things surrounding them, if they want to be spiritual, if they want to be loving, if they want to be kind. There's
Right.
absolutely nothing wrong with having the comforts, provided they don't become everything.
Right.
Do either of you want to say anything to that? And you can disagree with me if you like. I mean, by all means.
No, that's what I was trying to say. I didn't think that the idea of spirituality and the idea of materialism were exclusive. I felt like, I believe that they can live in harmony, and again, offering help when you can. And for some, and I'm not saying this from an ego place. I'm just saying it because it happens. I give where I can, and I do that often because I can, and it feels really good. And it's not about the payback. It's not about the payoff, except what goes around comes around. And the more you give, the more you get. And it may be getting may be just in seeing someone else expand. Has nothing to do with me.
And I think it's the giving, giving for the right reasons, not because you want the accolades, not because
Right.
you want the pat on the back, not because you want everyone to know what a generous person you are. Giving quietly, giving kindly, doing the small things. I think it's important that having an attitude of giving and loving for the right reasons. And I think if we can have an attitude of giving and loving for the right reasons, then we get closer to living our faith, which is what our ancient cultures do teach us, if we care to listen, if we care to take notice, if we go back to those ancients, the grandfathers, and allow them to teach us these things and to listen to what they have to say to us. Be humble, have a really big dose of humility. I think is how do we get back to the living our faith, to what the ancients have to tell us, understanding that we know nothing.
I'm reading I just finished reading a book. Can I tell a book title on this?
Sure, of course you can do it.
I think the title of the book is Voices in the Stones, and it's a book by a guy named Kent Nerburn, who's written a number of books of being an observer, a white man in the native culture. And one of the things that he talks about is elders in our society. We've created a situation, and he was not being totally critical of it, but we've created a society where we have nursing homes and elderly housing and apartments for the infirmed and partial care, and for good reasons and necessary reasons, because of the way we live. But the sense of purpose for that elder goes away.
They're
While you
invisible.
were talking, Al, you were asking, what would I tell somebody? How would I ask? Seek out, go talk to your oldest aunt. Go talk to your oldest living relative and say, tell me your earliest memory. That moment of them telling that story, you just brought them a dozen roses.
And what their experiences are, right? And what they learned from, right?
Exactly.
one of the exercises for my students is take a tape recorder or whatever it is now that people use and go and find one of the elders in your family
Mm,
and tell them, I'd love to interview you. I want to, can you tell me, and ask questions. What were you like when you were a young girl? What did you used to do, and so on. Pretty soon that person is talking to you. Pretty soon they're sharing, and as you said, Jeff, it's like giving someone a bunch of roses. It's there's this amazing saying, and I actually put it on my Instagram and Twitter. There's a photo of an old lady, and she's sitting on a bench, and the quote is, I won't get it quite right, but the worst feeling is not being lonely, but being forgotten.
right.
And
Wow.
and it so resonated with me. I just put it out there for everybody because, and you don't have to be old to feel forgotten either.
Right.
Lots of kids feel forgotten, lots of teenagers feel forgotten, but it's not loneliness that is the worst feeling, although that's not great. But the worst feeling is being forgotten. And if we can all have an attitude of remembering and making certain that we remember, and that we, even if it's only for even if we've only got 5 minutes in a week or a month or something, but to go and visit someone and take something with you, and it doesn't have to be anything expensive, just take yourself, but I like my students to have that experience of going and recording, because you've got that for life. When that person dies, you've still got their voice, you can still hear their voice, you can have their opinions, you've got a little piece of them to keep safe with you.
One of one of my most special things that we actually recorded my father before he passed away to talk about how he met my mother and when he was younger, and I'll often just listen to the sounds of that. And it's just what you're talking about is it's really analogous to what we're talking about for the show, learning lessons about attitude from these ancient cultures, but also those that are living now, the elders that are living now. You could learn a lot just from their experiences, just from their pains, their heartaches, their happiness, what their successes, their failures, and not think of the elders here as sort of these invisible entities that we can't learn from and can't talk to. And I think that's what happens. They do, Rosemary, as people get older, their opinions in this society matter less to most. They become almost invisible in a way, and it should be the complete opposite if you base it on some of these more intelligent past civilizations that used to not just admire but learn from what those experiences were from the elders. And really, like Jeff, you were saying before, once you step up and say, I'm listening, to have the responsibility to actually really listen and learn from what they are saying and be able to apply it to your own life and your own experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult. I live alone. I spend a lot of my life by myself. And people say things like, "Oh, if we'd have known you were on your own, we'd have invited you here, or we'd have invited you there," and so on. And I had a group of students once, and it didn't matter how many times I said to them, "Anyone want to go to the movie? Just call me and let me know, because I am on my own." Or if and I always invite people to my house. Anybody can come. I don't care. Strangers off the street, I'll feed
And she's
them.
a great cook too.
I am a great cook, and I'll feed people. But I think, and it used to happen in England. I was never without an invitation somewhere or another. But unfortunately, since I moved and don't have the same people around me, and having said that, I've lived in the States for 17, 18 years, something like that. But still, people will just say, "Oh, I thought, I thought you wouldn't want to come here, or thought, you wouldn't want to have tea with me," or something. Didn't matter how many times I said it. And so you sit at home and you do tend to feel forgotten. At the same time, I do understand that, people have got busy lives, and so there you are, there you have it. But I think in this day and age, I think, I didn't realize that you were by yourself or something. I think it's just an excuse, because really, it's hard sometimes. I don't find it hard to entertain. I'm British. I find it easy to entertain, but it's hard, I think, sometimes to entertain, or sometimes to make room for somebody else in your life, or to make room for to other people. You know, if I think that there's a person on their own, if I'm having a big dinner party and I've got friends from all over the world come to this whatever it is, if I think there's a neighbour on their own, even if I don't know them very well, I'm going to invite them. I'm going to say, don't be on your own, come on over. But I think it gets harder and harder for people to do that. And I've no idea why that is.
Yeah.
So we do have a couple comments, Rosemary. We're almost out of time, I know, but we have a couple comments. We have Maggie said a little while ago, I believe you should be able to go into any place of worship and find God or your higher being. And also says, don't let people tell you they're more religious or believing than you. For everyone who walks into a place of worship have done something. Nobody's perfect, essentially. And she says, walking barefoot connects you spiritually to the ground and that around you. And then Nettie says, a few people say hello. Karen and a couple other people say hello. Nettie says, do you think stepping back then forces you to face reality, and that reality is too hard to bear?
Yes, which is why you say, I can't do that. Which is why Jeff said, that's specifically for Nettie, which is why Jeff, when I was teaching Jeff about using it, about the importance of using your solar plexus to breathe, he knew on some level, I think, Jeff, this is fair to say, that was going to unlock stuff, emotions within you that you really didn't want to deal with. So rather than deal with them, I can't do it that way. That's your immediate, because you're afraid. But once you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you get on with it, right, Jeff?
Sure. The nervous laughter comes and goes.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And yeah, keep going.
So
Al.
yeah, that was Marianne says watching with love, and people are afraid. She says, and that's about it for today.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to then give the last word over to Jeff. Any wise words of wisdom for anybody living out there, listening out there, should I say, on, what would you suggest that would be the one really helpful thing that you could tell people to do to have that attitude of trusting and living your faith on an everyday basis?
Boy.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Well,
that's not on the spot at all, is it? Right?
good question. It's a good question, and I think that the first answer that came into my mind, I'll go with, and it is asking someone else around you for help.
Yeah.
Engaging with another person.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in my life, and I've never been alone. I'm not a victim, but I spent a lot of times trying to figure things out on my own. And when I finally started asking for help and asking for advice and taking some of it, things are getting easier. And I know I'm 63 years old, so maybe it's coming with age. I'm tired of doing the battle, but ask someone else for help.
Yeah, talking about I'm not a victim, I just need to clarify that even though I'm on my own and I don't get lots of invitations, I am not a victim either. I would say, aside from what you've said, Jeff, I would say reaching out.
Right.
The way to help yourself is to reach out and help somebody else. So if you see someone in trouble, or you see somebody just wants an arm put around them, or whatever it is, just do it.
Right.
Just do that. Al, any quick?
Nope.
Are you passing? We're done.
I'm good.
Well, all right. Well, thank
Hey,
you.
before we go, I just want to ask, can anybody see the halo around my head?
Yes, actually, Jeff, I've always actually. Let me be clear. I've always seen the halo, but I don't see it around your head. I see it around your neck. And I can only, just so everybody understands, I can only say that to Jeff because we're really, really great friends. But yeah, you need to get rid of it, because sometimes it's choking you.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So I just want to say it's been a fun night. It's been a fun show. Al, once again, thank you for being a great co-host. We actually made it on time tonight, didn't we? It was like
We did.
woohoo! Jeff, once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. You've been really, really great. I'm going to ask all of you out there who are watching, share. Put it on your Facebook page or whatever it is and share it with everybody that you can share it with, because, we're trying to get the word out here that none of us are on our own ever. So, share. If you want to know more about our show, Everything is Attitude, we're on Friday evenings. If you want to be on the show, just write to Al at alpasano.com or info@everythingisattitude.com. Can you believe I remembered that? See, I remembered that. If you need to know more about me or want to know anything more about me, you can email me, Rosemary, at rosemaryaltea.com, and my lovely Michelle will do her best to answer your emails. We shall be live once again on Thursday mornings with our The Spirit World Sees All show, where you can join in, you can do live chats, and we do our best to answer the questions that we get in on that. It's a fun show. And if you want to know anything more about us or anything about our online lessons, Al and I you do the technical stuff, right? Al and I I'm the teacher.
You do the hard stuff.
I'm a terrifying teacher. Anyway, if you want to know any more about us, so you can email al@alpasano.com. If you have a topic that you'd like to talk about, if you'd like to be on the show like Jeff, or if you prefer to sort of not necessarily be on camera, but you can talk just the same, you can do that also. So info@everythingisattitude.com or al@alpasano.com. Right. Jeff, I hope you'll come back and see us again. I know you will, because I should twist your arm at me back, but I know that you enjoy it.
I did. Thank you.
Once again, you've been a fantastic and a wonderful friend and a wonderful guest. And so that's it. So until we see you all again, whenever it is, please, it is Friday night. So please have a very blessed rest of the day and have a very blessed weekend, everybody. Thank you for watching.